In Newark, New Jersey, during the winter of 2024, the lives of Marcus Tate, 32, and Aisha Coleman, 29, appeared, at first glance, to reflect the everyday pursuit of the American dream. Both African American, Marcus and Aisha lived in Ironbound, a working-class neighborhood known for its cultural diversity and vibrant streets, where the aroma of Portuguese steakhouses mingled with the sound of hip-hop blasting from passing cars. Newark, a city shaped by decades of economic inequality and recent revitalization, was the backdrop of their lives, a place where hope and struggle coexisted. Ironbound streets, lined with family-owned shops, corner markets, and colorful graffiti, pulsed with an energy that was both welcoming and chaotic. In winter, the biting cold brought a relative quiet, but it never dimmed the neighborhood's vitality, where Christmas lights still hung on some porches even in February. Marcus was an auto mechanic at a local shop called Jersey Rides, a small but respected garage on Ferry Street. The shop, with its tool-covered walls and oil-stained floors, was a sanctuary for Marcus, where he felt in control. Known for his skill with engines, he could diagnose issues with near-intuitive precision, and for his reserved demeanor, which masked an intensity few noticed. When provoked, his gaze hardened, and his sparse words could cut like blades. Raised by a single mother in a South Ward housing project, Marcus carried emotional scars from a childhood marked by domestic violence and financial instability. He recalled nights when his mother, exhausted from double shifts as a cleaner, struggled to keep the household afloat while sirens wailed outside. These memories fueled his pride in his independence but also fed a fragile self-esteem. On social media, he saw men his age flaunting luxury cars, vacations, and designer clothes, prompting him to question his own worth. At 32, he wondered if he had already peaked. Aisha, in contrast, was a charismatic figure whose presence lit up any room. A social worker at a community center in the heart of Ironbound, she worked with at-risk youth, helping them navigate the complexities of a city where opportunities were scarce. The center, a brick building adorned with murals by local artists, was a haven where teens found support, from tutoring to art workshops. Aisha had a gift for connecting with youth, listening to their stories without judgment, and offering advice that blended pragmatism and hope. Raised in a middle-class family in East Orange, her parents, a teacher and a nurse, instilled in her the value of education and community service. After graduating with a degree in social work from Rutgers University, Aisha returned to Newark, determined to make a difference. Her friends admired her empathy and drive, but also pressured her to always be this strong one. Her warm smile and listening ear made her magnetic, but in private moments, Aisha grappled with the pressure of being seen as perfect by her family and community. She kept a diary where she wrote about her doubts, fears, and the exhaustion of carrying others' expectations. Marcus and Aisha's relationship began in 2022 at a music festival in Branch Brook Park, during a spring afternoon when cherry blossoms were in full bloom. Marcus, drawn to Aisha's energy as she danced with friends, mustered the courage to approach her. His shy, almost clumsy approach was offset by a sincerity in his eyes that won her over. Aisha, charmed by his honesty and the contrast between his rugged appearance and hesitant speech, agreed to a coffee date. Their romance blossomed quickly, fueled by dates at local diners, walks along the Passaic River, and nights watching movies on Aisha's old couch. However, the relationship wasn't without challenges. Marcus, who had never had a stable relationship, felt insecure about Aisha's confidence and independence. He wondered if he was good enough for her, especially when he saw her interacting with colleagues or college friends who seemed more articulate or successful. Aisha, in turn, sometimes grew frustrated with Marcus's difficulty expressing emotions. She knew he loved her, but his one-word answers or prolonged silences made her feel like she was constantly decoding him. Still, Aisha saw in Marcus a hardworking man with a loyal heart and potential for growth, which kept her invested. A central figure in Aisha's life was her pitbull, Duke. Adopted from a shelter in 2020, Duke was more than a pet. He was a companion who helped her cope with the stress of her job and the loneliness of quiet nights. With his gray coat and expressive eyes, Duke had a calm but protective presence. He slept at the foot of Aisha's bed, snoring softly, and joined her on morning runs in Lincoln Park, where they drew admiring glances from neighbors who respected the dog's loyalty. For Aisha, Duke was a symbol of resilience. Rescued from abandonment, he trusted her unconditionally. Marcus initially found Duke cute, and even played with him, tossing a tennis ball in the backyard. Over time, however, he began to resent Aisha's attachment to the dog. "You talk to him like he's a person," he'd say, half joking, half serious, as Aisha petted Duke and shared how he saved her from tough days. Marcus wouldn't admit it openly, but he was jealous of the attention Duke received, especially when Aisha prioritized the dog over plans with him. Marcus and Aisha's social life was typical of Ironbound. They attended backyard barbecues, where the smell of grilled ribs and the sound of laughter filled the air. They watched Nets games at local bars like Tate's, sharing chicken wings and cheering with the crowd. They joined community events, like the annual African American Culture Festival at the Newark Museum, where they danced to jazz and bought crafts from local vendors. These moments tied them to the neighborhood and their cultural identity, but Ironbound also had its tensions. Rising living costs, driven by new luxury condos replacing old warehouses, were pushing Black and Latino families out. Rent hikes weighed heavily on Marcus, who rented a small one-bedroom apartment and worked overtime at the garage to make ends meet, yet still felt trapped. Aisha, who shared a townhouse with a coworker, was in a more stable position but still had to manage her finances carefully. The disparity in their economic realities fueled Marcus's insecurities, making him wonder if Aisha saw him as a project rather than a partner. The first signs of strain emerged in early 2024, as winter brought harsh cold and a series of minor conflicts. Marcus began commenting on the time Aisha spent with Duke, especially when she canceled plans to care for the dog, who had an ear infection. Aisha took Duke to the vet regularly, administered medication, and stayed up nights monitoring his recovery. To her, it was a matter of responsibility and affection, but Marcus took it as personal rejection. "You'd rather be with him than me," he said one night after an argument at her apartment. Aisha laughed, thinking it was a joke, but Marcus's tone was sharp, his eyes revealing a hurt she hadn't expected. He began to feel like an outsider in the relationship, secondary to the affection Aisha reserved for Duke. These small cracks, seemingly harmless, foreshadowed a tragedy. Marcus and Aisha's daily routines reflected their personalities and challenges. Marcus woke early at 6 a.m. to open the garage. He drank black coffee from a cracked mug, skimmed news on his phone, and drove his old Honda Civic to work, where he spent the day fixing cars and handling demanding customers. In his downtime, he worked on a personal project, a 1967 Chevy Impala he was restoring, dreaming of showcasing it at a car meet. Aisha started her day with a run with Duke, followed by a quick breakfast, usually avocado toast, while reviewing her schedule at the community center. She spent afternoons in meetings with youth, families, and social workers, coordinating programs and navigating bureaucratic hurdles. At night, she and Marcus sometimes met for dinner at a local Portuguese restaurant, sharing cod dishes and talking about their day. But these conversations were often punctuated by awkward silences, especially when Marcus withdrew in response to questions about his feelings or future plans. Ironbound shaped their lives in subtle ways. On Saturday mornings, Aisha joined community cleanups, helping clear vacant lots or distribute food baskets. Marcus, less involved in community activities, preferred spending weekends with garage buddies, playing cards or watching boxing matches on TV. Despite their differences, they found balance in shared moments, like walks in Riverfront Park, where Newark's skyline blended with Manhattan's distant glow. During these times, Aisha tried to draw Marcus out of his shell, sharing funny stories about her teens at the community center, while he responded with short comments but genuine smiles. Yet, the shadow of Marcus's insecurities and the growing tension over Duke loomed, like clouds signaling an approaching storm. The escalation of tensions between Marcus and Aisha stemmed from a toxic mix of jealousy, insecurity, and communication failures. Marcus, already grappling with feelings of inadequacy, began to interpret Aisha's bond with Duke as a personal rejection. To him, the dog wasn't just a pet but a symbol of everything he couldn't offer: unwavering loyalty, emotional stability, and the ability to make Aisha smile effortlessly. Every time Aisha petted Duke or spoke to him in a tender tone, Marcus felt a sting of exclusion, as if he were being pushed to the margins of her life. Unable to articulate these feelings, they festered, turning into resentment. Psychological analysis of Marcus reveals a man trapped in a cycle of self-deprecation. Experts who later studied the case pointed to his childhood as a source of unresolved trauma. Raised in Newark's South Ward, Marcus grew up in an environment where violence was constant. He recalled nights hiding in his room, listening to his mother's screams as her unstable partner broke furniture or assaulted her. The absence of his biological father, who abandoned the family when Marcus was 3, left a void he never knew how to fill. These experiences shaped a man with a desperate need for validation but an inability to handle perceived rejection. Marcus saw Aisha as a chance for redemption, someone who could see him as enough. Yet, every minor conflict, like when she prioritized Duke or received praise from male colleagues at the community center, rekindled his insecurities. He constantly compared himself to these men, who seemed more confident, educated, and deserving of Aisha's affection. In his mind, he was always the loser, and Duke, with his silent, loyal presence, amplified this perception. Aisha, meanwhile, didn't grasp the depth of Marcus's distress. She loved him, but her natural confidence and independence sometimes made him feel small. As a social worker, Aisha was accustomed to handling people in crisis, and her ability to stay calm under pressure was one of her greatest strengths. However, this same strength made her less attuned to Marcus's insecurities, which she mistook for stubbornness or temporary moodiness. Aisha also faced her own pressures. As a black woman in a predominantly white professional setting, she constantly felt the need to prove her worth. At the community center, she dealt with supervisors who questioned her decisions, colleagues who saw her as too emotional, and a workload that demanded daily emotional juggling. Duke was an emotional anchor for her, a being who required nothing but love. When she came home exhausted after hours listening to teen stories of domestic violence or poverty, Duke was there, lying on the rug, wagging his tail, ready to offer comfort. She didn't see the dog as a threat to the relationship but as an essential part of her life, a reminder that joy still existed amid chaos. Ironbound's social environment also played a role in the couple's tensions. Marcus and Aisha continued to frequent the same spaces: backyard barbecues, karaoke nights at the Ironbound Tavern, community events at the Newark Museum, but their interactions began to reveal cracks. During a barbecue in October 2024, Aisha chatted animatedly with a colleague from the community center, a man named Jamal, who praised her work with youth. Marcus, watching from afar while clutching a beer, felt his stomach churn. He said nothing at the time, but later, in the car, he asked Aisha sharply, "Why do you need so much attention from those guys?" Surprised, Aisha tried to explain it was just professional talk, but Marcus had already shut down, staring out the window as he drove. These moments piled up, each adding a layer of distrust to Marcus's mind. The emotional trigger came during Thanksgiving 2024. Marcus and Aisha had planned to spend the day with her family in East Orange, an event Marcus dreaded but agreed to for her sake. He knew her parents, especially her father, a man of strong opinions, viewed him with skepticism, as if doubting his ability to take care of Aisha. The prospect of facing them already made him anxious, but the situation worsened when Duke, recovering from surgery to remove a cyst, needed extra care. Aisha chose to stay home, suggesting Marcus go alone. "It's just a dog, Aisha," he said, his voice laced with frustration as he gripped his car keys. "He's not just a dog, Marcus. He needs me," she replied firmly, her eyes mixing exhaustion and resolve. The argument escalated quickly, with Marcus accusing Aisha of putting him second and Aisha retorting that he was being selfish. The confrontation ended with Marcus storming out, slamming her apartment door so hard the sound echoed down the hallway. In the days that followed, Marcus began to spiral. He saw photos of Aisha and Duke on Instagram, where she posted images of the dog lounging on the couch with captions like, "My best friend," or "Always saving me." Friends' affectionate comments, "Duke's the best," or "You two are perfect together," felt like stabs to Marcus. He spent hours scrolling through her feed, each like fueling his sense of exclusion. He started drinking more, frequenting the Ironbound tavern after work, where the noise of conversations and the smell of beer helped drown his thoughts. At the bar, he vented to coworkers like Tony, an older mechanic who offered practical advice. "Man, it's just a dog. Talk to her," Tony said one night, wiping sweat from his brow with a napkin. But Marcus couldn't. His anger grew, fed by an internal narrative of betrayal. He began to believe Aisha preferred Duke because the dog didn't challenge her, didn't fail, didn't carry the scars Marcus bore. Marcus's motivation for the crime wasn't just jealousy but a need for control. Psychologists who later analyzed the case noted that he felt he was losing Aisha, not to another man, but to something he couldn't compete with. In his mind, Duke represented his own inadequacy, a personification of everything he believed he lacked. The idea of eliminating the dog began as a vengeful fantasy that surfaced in moments of anger. He imagined how it would feel if Duke simply disappeared, how it might bring Aisha back to him. But as days passed, this fantasy darkened. He wanted to punish Aisha for making him feel small, even if he didn't consciously admit it. His anger wasn't just at Duke but at the vulnerability Aisha stirred in him. The possibility of the crime built gradually, like a storm gathering on the horizon. Marcus began watching Aisha's habits more closely, noting when she walked Duke in Lincoln Park or was home alone. He memorized times when Aisha's housemate, a nurse who worked night shifts, was absent. One night, while fixing a carburetor at the garage, Marcus found himself thinking about how he could fix the situation. He bought a kitchen knife at a department store on Market Street, telling himself it was to protect the apartment from hypothetical burglars. Deep down, though, he knew he was preparing for something. The knife, with its gleaming blade and black handle, stayed in a drawer in his apartment, but he'd pick it up sometimes, feeling its weight, as if testing his own resolve. Aisha, unaware of the darkness growing in Marcus, kept trying to mend the relationship. She sent sweet texts like, "Miss you, can we talk?" or "Wanna hit that new spot on Ferry Street?" She invited Marcus over for dinner, cooking simple meals like roast chicken and pasta, hoping to recapture the intimacy of their early days. Marcus responded coldly, with short replies like "busy" or "maybe tomorrow." He showed up to some dinners but was distant, as if elsewhere. Aisha noticed the change but chalked it up to work stress or the financial pressure he faced. She tried to engage him, asking about the Chevy Impala he was restoring or their Christmas plans, but his monosyllabic answers and averted gaze shut her out. Meanwhile, Duke, oblivious to the conflict, lay at Aisha's feet, occasionally nudging her for a pet, which only deepened Marcus's silent irritation. Ironbound, with its blend of vitality and tension, remained the backdrop to their drama. The streets were decked out for winter, with twinkling lights and makeshift Christmas trees in shop windows. But gentrification marched on, and residents felt the weight of rising rents and new neighbors, many young white professionals working in Manhattan. Marcus, already struggling to afford his rent, felt increasingly out of place, as if the neighborhood he knew was being stolen. Aisha, more engaged with the community, attended meetings at the community center to discuss gentrification's impact, but even she felt the exhaustion of fighting larger forces. These external pressures amplified the couple's internal tensions, making every disagreement feel bigger than it was. On the night of December 10, 2024, Marcus arrived at Aisha's apartment around 8 p.m. His plan was rudimentary but deliberate. He had spent days observing Aisha's habits, noting when she was alone. He knew that night her housemate, a nurse named Lena, would be in Philadelphia visiting family. Marcus carried the kitchen knife, hidden at the bottom of his black backpack under an old hoodie. He told himself he just wanted to talk, That maybe a conversation could resolve the storm of emotions consuming him. But deep down, his mind was clouded by a mix of anger, desperation, and an uncontrollable need to reclaim the control he felt slipping away. Aisha's apartment, on the second floor of a townhouse on Adams Street, was small but cozy. The walls were adorned with family photos, posters from local festivals, and a colorful painting Aisha had bought at the Newark Museum. The scent of jasmine from a diffuser mingled with the faint smell of Duke's kibble. The night was cold, and wind whistled through poorly sealed windows, creating an atmosphere both intimate and unsettling. Marcus rang the doorbell, feeling the weight of the backpack on his shoulder, and his heart racing. He hesitated, glancing at the dark street where Christmas lights blinked on some porches, before hearing Aisha's footsteps descending the stairs. Based on witness accounts and forensic evidence, Aisha opened the door with a genuine smile, surprised by the unannounced visit. "Hey babe, good to see you," she said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Duke, lying in the hallway, stood and barked, his tail wagging with excitement at recognizing Marcus. Aisha wore a gray Rutgers University hoodie and pajama pants, suggesting she was relaxed, perhaps planning a quiet night. Marcus stepped inside, stiff, his shoulders tense and gaze evasive. He mumbled a barely audible, "Hey," and walked to the living room sofa, where he sat, hands gripping his thighs. Aisha, sensing his tension, closed the door and approached, sitting in an armchair nearby. "What's going on, Marcus? You're acting weird," she said, her voice blending concern with an attempt at lightness. Marcus responded with short phrases like, "Nothing, just came to see you." But his eyes were fixed on Duke, now resting on the rug, chewing a rubber toy. Their initial conversation was strained. Aisha tried to make small talk, asking about Marcus's work at Jersey Rides and mentioning a community event she was planning. He replied with monosyllables, typical when he was in a bad mood, but something was different that night. His fingers drummed nervously on the sofa's arm, and he kept the backpack close, as if afraid to let it out of reach. Aisha, still trying to ease the tension, offered him a beer, but Marcus declined, unusual for him. The silence between them grew, broken only by Duke's chewing and the occasional sound of cars passing outside. The tipping point came when Aisha stood to get water for Duke. She walked to the kitchen, a small area separated from the living room by a counter, and filled his bowl. As she returned, she crouched to pet Duke, murmuring something affectionate like, "Good boy." Marcus, watching, felt a surge of rage flood his chest. The sight of Aisha so at ease with Duke, so connected to him, reignited all the insecurities he'd been harboring. "You love that dog more than me," he shouted, leaping from the sofa with a suddenness that made Duke lift his head, alert. Aisha, confused, stood, holding the water bowl. "Marcus, stop it. You know I love you," she said, trying to calm him, but her voice trembled slightly, as if she was beginning to sense the gravity of the situation. Marcus, however, was beyond reason. His eyes blazed with a mix of anger and pain, and his hands shook. He took a step forward, grabbing the backpack and pulling out the knife in a swift motion. The blade gleamed under the dim living room light, and Aisha, in panic, dropped the bowl, the clang of metal on the floor echoing in the silence. "Marcus, what are you doing?" she screamed, stepping back. She tried to run toward the hallway to her bedroom, but Marcus caught her in the kitchen before she could escape. The crime was swift but brutal. Marcus stabbed Aisha multiple times, driven by an explosion of rage he later described as a blackout. Each thrust seemed to unleash months of frustration, jealousy, and self-loathing. Aisha tried to defend herself, raising her arms, but Marcus's strength was overwhelming. Duke, reacting to the chaos, lunged and bit Marcus's arm, his teeth sinking into flesh. Marcus yelled in pain and kicked Duke away, sending the dog sliding across the floor with a yelp. Aisha collapsed on the kitchen floor, blood staining the white tiles. Marcus, in shock at what he'd done, stood frozen for minutes, knife still in hand, chest heaving. Duke, now beside Aisha, whimpered softly, licking her face as if trying to rouse her. The dog's sounds, combined with the apartment's oppressive silence, seemed to pierce the fog in Marcus's mind. He looked at Aisha, the blood, the knife, and a wave of dread washed over him. He didn't touch Duke, who stayed by Aisha's side, eyes fixed on Marcus as if accusing him. After the act, Marcus tried to clean the blood, grabbing a dish towel and frantically scrubbing the floor, but soon realized it was futile. Blood seemed everywhere, on the counter, his hands, his clothes. He tossed the towel down and placed the knife in the sink, as if leaving it there could erase what he'd done. Stumbling, he left the apartment, descending the stairs with heavy steps, backpack still on his shoulder. The cold night air hit him like a slap, but he barely noticed. He got into his Honda Civic and drove aimlessly, stopping at a vacant lot on Ironbound's outskirts, where he sat in the car for hours. His mind swung between guilt and justification. "She made me do this," he muttered, rubbing his face with trembling hands, though part of him knew it wasn't true. The arm where Duke bit him throbbed, but he didn't care. He sat in the dark, the sound of wind against the car his only companion, as he tried to process the weight of his actions. Police were alerted on the morning of December 11, 2024, when Lena, Aisha's housemate, returned from Philadelphia. Opening the apartment door, Lena was met with an eerie silence, broken only by Duke's low whimpers. She found Aisha's body in the kitchen, surrounded by dried blood, with Duke still beside her, refusing to leave, his eyes fixed on the floor as if in mourning. The crime scene was chaotic. White kitchen tiles were stained, utensils were knocked over on the counter, and Duke's water bowl lay near the sink. Lena, in shock, called 911, her voice shaking as she described the scene. Police arrival turned quiet Adams Street into a flurry of sirens and yellow tape, drawing neighbors who gathered on sidewalks, whispering speculations. The investigation, led by Newark Police Department's Detective Carla Simmons, a meticulous veteran, moved swiftly. Forensics collected evidence: fingerprints on the knife in the sink, bloodstains on the dish towel, and signs of a struggle on Aisha's body. Aisha's phone, found on the kitchen counter, revealed recent tense texts with Marcus, including one from the prior week where he accused her of not caring about him. Neighbors reported seeing Marcus leave the building around 9 p.m. the previous night, looking distraught and hurrying. An elderly downstairs neighbor mentioned hearing a muffled argument but dismissed it as a typical couple's spat. These clues pointed to Marcus, who was named the prime suspect within 24 hours. Marcus was arrested 2 days later, on December 13th, at his Ironbound apartment. Police, executing a search warrant, found blood-stained clothes hidden in a bag in his closet, along with the backpack he carried that night. During interrogation, Marcus, exhausted and visibly shaken, confessed almost immediately. His account was muddled, a mix of flimsy justifications and late remorse. He spoke of his jealousy of Duke, calling the dog an obstacle in their relationship, and accused Aisha of humiliating him by prioritizing the animal. "She made me feel like I was nothing," he said, voice breaking, as he rubbed his face. Detective Simmons, unfazed, noted every word, spotting contradictions in his story. The prosecution, led by seasoned attorney Rachel Torres, charged him with first-degree murder, citing premeditation evidenced by the knife purchased weeks earlier and Marcus's obsessive behavior leading up to the crime. The impact on Ironbound was profound and immediate. News of Aisha's death spread like wildfire, shocking friends, colleagues, and neighbors who knew her as a force of kindness and resilience. Aisha's devastated family held a vigil at the community center where she worked, drawing hundreds on a cold December night. Candles were lit, and photos of Aisha, smiling at community events or with Duke, were displayed on a makeshift altar. Teens she'd mentored shared stories of how Aisha encouraged them to dream big despite Newark's challenges. Her mother, a soft-spoken woman with pain-filled eyes, thanked the community but asked for privacy to grieve. The case sparked heated debates at community meetings and on social media, with many calling for action on domestic violence and mental health in the Black community. Local activists, like Pastor Denise Williams, held forums to discuss how untreated trauma can escalate into tragedy, using Aisha's story as a call to action. Duke, the pitbull who tried to protect Aisha, became a symbol of her memory. After the crime, he was taken to a temporary shelter, where his refusal to eat worried caregivers. Aisha's younger sister, Keisha, a 24-year-old college student, adopted him, vowing to care for him in her sister's honor. Keisha brought Duke to her home in East Orange, where he slowly adjusted, though he never stopped lying by the door, as if waiting for Aisha's return. Photos of Duke at the vigil, with his gray coat and sad eyes, circulated online, paired with captions like, "Aisha lives in you, Duke." Legally, Marcus faced a swift trial, starting in March 2025 and ending in April. The prosecution built a strong case with forensic evidence, text messages, and testimony from Aisha's friends, who described Marcus's increasingly erratic behavior. The defense argued he acted in a moment of passion, but the premeditation was undeniable. Psychologists testified about Marcus's mental state, citing a mix of borderline personality disorder and untreated trauma from a childhood marked by violence and abandonment. A psychiatrist, Dr. James Carter, explained that Marcus showed signs of poor emotional regulation, making him prone to rage when faced with perceived rejection. Marcus expressed remorse in court, tears streaming as he said, "I didn't mean to hurt her. I loved her." But to many in the room, including Aisha's silent family, his words rang hollow, a belated echo of an avoidable tragedy. On April 15, 2025, Marcus was sentenced to life in prison without parole, a verdict that brought relief to Aisha's family but didn't heal their pain. Post-crime psychological analysis by criminology and mental health experts revealed the murder as the result of a perfect storm: chronic insecurity, irrational jealousy, and an inability to manage intense emotions. Marcus wasn't a stereotypical monster but a broken man undone by his own limitations, unable to seek help before his rage consumed him. His childhood, scarred by domestic violence and paternal absence, left wounds he never addressed, twisting his insecurities into a distorted lens through which he viewed the world. Aisha, meanwhile, was a victim of an unforeseeable tragedy, a woman whose empathy and strength couldn't shield her from a partner trapped in his own darkness. Friends like Aisha's coworker Maya reflected on missed signs, wondering if they could have intervened. The events left a lingering question, echoed in Ironbound's bars, churches, and community meetings: how can small misunderstandings and insecurities escalate to destruction? In Newark, Marcus and Aisha's story became a grim reminder of human relationships' fragility. The community center where Aisha worked launched a program in her memory, focused on mental health for young men, hoping to prevent future tragedies. Meanwhile, the city kept pulsing, its vibrant streets and tensions carrying the scars of a loss that touched all who knew Aisha.